coaching, it's this ego to ego thing, is what I've heard from a psychoanalyst colleague of mine. And I remember in the beginning, I thought it was quite derogatory because I'm like, I got really defensive. Like, no, no, I mean, what do you mean? And because ego to ego just sounds like that's not good, right? But I think what she meant was um, when you come from a perspective of working with the unconscious, and you have that Freudian view of what how the mind works, how the psychic apparatus functions, then ego is just that part of the mind that is very much above the surface. And so coaching as an ego to ego practice in a way makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of coaches have understood and appreciate and also started to work with the stuff that comes from the unconscious, the stuff underneath the surface of the iceberg model, if you will. My colleague Lawrence Barrett, a Jungian coach, recently published Coaching with the Unconscious. And so there's a lot that comes into play. There's a lot that comes from underneath the surface and shows up in our everyday experiences. So I think it's really helpful to figure out ways to listen to that. Another colleague of mine, Avi Goran Bar, also a Jungian coach, who will be in the coaching lab in February 2026, depending on when you're watching this. He has a lot of methodologies and a lot of techniques for coaches that he teaches in his coaching school. So there's ways to bring the unconscious out through symbolism, through various other means. And I think as coaches, especially if you're an advanced coach or a coach looking to do more advanced work, there's a lot going on. And it brings out a lot of complexity, because then you also need to be attuned with what's coming from your unconscious, because our unconsciouses, they interact all the time. That's the transference that is sometimes hard to grasp for coaches, right? But there's a lot going on in terms of relationship dynamics. And when we go beyond the purely ego to ego practice of helping somebody adjust the behavior, we run into boundaries when we don't take these things into mind. And that's where it gets really interesting, and that's where it gets advanced. So any coach who would like to advance their practice, mature, work, across the board, across the spectrum of what people experience, at some point, the unconscious is already in play, but at some point you're going to have to work with it, because there's a limit to what this ego to ego practice can do. Right? So I now no longer see that as a derogatory term, but it is a limitation to the work that we can do together with people.